Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
This thing worked? Fantastic. I am English. I will speak in English. That's okay, but I will speak slowly if I can. Does everybody know what DOOH is? DOOH? Digital out of home. I just thought I'd explain that just in case if you're thinking, what on earth is award-winning DOOH? Digital out of home. You're going to get two presentations in one today. I'm going to talk about brilliant out of home, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of a glimpse of the future towards the end. So I'll talk about what is potentially in the future of out of home, but also some of it is also relevant to all of digital media as well. So I'm going to show you the campaigns. So there's going to be 10 of these, and then I'll give you the special extra presentation at the end. So the first one, so if you were in social media, this would be the MySpace. This would be the original, the OG campaign. This is British Airways. And this was the first one that really people thought, hang on a minute, I can be a technologist and a creative in digital out of home. So what's going on here on this billboard here is they're looking at the flights from British Airways flights. And if you don't know London, the flights go across the centre of London and they go down the Thames and they land at Heathrow. So there's a lot of aeroplanes that go through the middle of London. So what they did is they geofenced technically and looked for any aeroplanes from the flight tracking radars, what planes were going over London, which ones were British Airways, and from that they could then get where its destination or where it's coming from. And what they wanted to do is give you the wonder of flight. So flight should be exciting, it should be wonderful, rather than just boring and humdrum. So that's what they did here. When a flight came across, had to be a BA flight, they then triggered this advert where a child comes along and looks up and goes, wow, that's the whatever it is from Barcelona. So it was really interesting how they managed to do that. Now, you couldn't really see this. Realistically, you had to be in the right position, because if you were to one side, the planes would be in the wrong place. So this was really about the video that you were watching, that you saw of the billboard. And that's something that comes back time and time again. Don't necessarily just think about the billboard. Think about how it has a journey onwards onto social media. And this is a really good example, possibly the first out there. So BA lookup. If somebody ever mentions that in the future, you go, ah, yes. That's the granddaddy, the grandmother of all digital advertising. So that's the good one. You should know about that one. This one is a bit cheeky. So it's still using data. This is from Australia. Now, not many people knew about this one, but it was very highly awarded back in the day. And data can be as boring as the weather. And you can do a billboard that says it's 22 degrees and cloudy, the weather. And you can do that, or you can make the information, the data, fun, and I dare say funny. So bonds are underwear for men. So the boys, quite frankly, there's no way of saying this, they're testicles. Okay? So they came up with these two little characters, the testicles, and if the weather was hot, they would be nice at the bottom of the billboard. If it was windy, they'd be swinging around. If it was cold, they'd be tight up at the top. So you can use data, you can use weather data, but you can also make it funny. And there was also an entire campaign. The two testicles were two characters, and they had a whole routine between the two of them. So it extended onto other media as well. So not only was the billboard the right shape, but it was also just making a fairly boring piece of data really interesting. So that's why that got awarded at the time. It was just humorous. This was the first campaign that I was, really, I'd say that it won several awards. This is the one that most people in the industry will then say, oh yes, I remembered that, if you're in the industry. So this is for Women's Aid, and it was about domestic violence. And the analogy was, well, you're not going to get anywhere with domestic violence if you just ignore it. You have to engage with it. If you don't look at it, if you don't interact with it, nothing will change. And that was really the creative idea behind the billboard. So we started with a billboard that what we wanted to do is say, is there any way of showing that if you looked at the billboard and you really engaged with it, something would change? And they went, well, we've not really got a way of doing that. There certainly aren't any cameras. So, well, if you look at the pictures of the billboard, there are some little security cameras. And they said, oh, those are for the customer trackings, just so that, but it's not our thing. So we just, well, can you introduce us to the camera people? And eventually they said, well, yes, and we managed to join the two together. So we had this billboard, had a woman in makeup with bruises, and if you looked at the advert and you literally looked at it for more than 2 seconds, you would be identified on the billboard and said thank you, and a bruise would disappear. And as you can see with the later end of this video, NBC, CBS, lots of news outlets came to cover it because we launched it on International Women's Day. So they were looking for stories. It was a great story, and as you can see, they did the publicity for us. So this won multiple Cannes Awards, it won lots of Effies, it won a huge amount of awards. But it was looking for that mischief. How can you take a piece of technology and do what it's not supposed to do? And when they say, no, you can't quite do it, just push through that and ask, well, why not? Can you just let me do that? So it's a good example of pushing through. This is from last year, and this uses QR codes. But the reason this won a huge amount of awards was about attribution. So how can you get somebody who sees a billboard to actively know that they bought something in a store or a shop or bought something? And this is a really interesting way of doing it. People love QR codes because they're mysterious. You're not quite sure where they're going to go. Sometimes that's bad, but a lot of the time it's good. And Japan had just come out of lockdown. Everybody was a bit bored. They wanted some new choices. So basically what they did is they said, we'll just show randomly. It wasn't always up there. Just occasionally, they'd show a QR code and say, quick, scan the QR code. You might win a meal at McDonald's. So they wanted to show people the new menu, and you could win one of the new menu items. But what it did is somebody scanned it with their phone. They went to a website on their phone. So we already know that that billboard has caused a website hit, and we can geolocate them. And then they walk into a McDonald's and say, I'd like to claim this, please. So we know exactly what billboards they scanned and what they then wanted to do with it and whether they claimed it or not. That attribution of data is really, really valuable. And that's really why this campaign won a huge amount of awards. It was really interesting using QR codes, but also bringing it through to an attributable sale. The anxiety meter, this is from here. This is a go-to digital and win Cannes Awards, for instance. So this is all about, it's an insurance company wanting to take the weight off your mind, make things easier. It shouldn't be difficult. So anybody who's anxious maybe could do with a bit of help to help doing that. So it uses face mapping, as you're seeing here, and you can do things like you can detect sadness, happiness, and if you train it enough, you can actually detect some vestiges of anxiety. And with that, you can then say, here's what you can do about that. Connect your phone, here's some things, go and maybe seek some help, do some research. We want to help you. So just using face recognition, and it's what you do with it. Most people say smile to activate the ad, but you can do some really subtle things with it as well. So again, that's a great use of technology. It's a piece of Google technology as well, so it's using all the good things as well. This is really about being in the right place at the right time. Billboards are local. How do you use local billboards? So this is actually for a knife crime charity in the UK, and they know that knife crime is difficult to actually solve. So they know that you can't really speak to people who are in gangs. You can't say, just don't do it. And they'll go, oh, okay. That doesn't work with knife crime. So there's a charity called the Ben Kinsella Trust who commissioned this ad, and what they did is they had some insight. The only person really that will get through to those people in the situation where there is some crime going on is probably their mother. If their mum rang up their phone and said, what are you doing? They go, oh, hi, mum, sorry. They would speak to everybody else, they probably wouldn't. So they use that insight. So what they did on this one is they actually trained a billboard to listen to ambulances, which triggered this kind of like emotional story to come onto the screen. So when there was an actual emergency going on with an ambulance in the local area, the billboard would trigger, and then it would play this emotional, behavioral advert that hopefully somebody would go, oh yeah, my mum, she'd be devastated if anything happened. So it's a really good use of not only training, there's a difference between the sirens on a police car and an ambulance, so they trained it for only ambulances. So it's about being hyper-local and being very relevant to the location. There's another example here, which is the opposite of that. So this is worldwide. So this originally won a competition for a creative idea for digital out-of-home, which then gave it some free media, and it went on from there, and people just started getting on the bandwagon for this one. This is called March for Giants. It's about elephants. It's about trying to get the message out that the elephants are dwindling. We all know this. How can we make a stand? How can we be with them? So you went to a website. You sponsored a virtual elephant. You could be a company, or you can be an individual. If you're an individual, you got your name on it, like you're seeing here, Justin, well done. But if you're a company, you could sponsor it, and that was then generating money for the charity. But the idea of this is you add to the herd, and the herd then would go up and down the country on different billboards, and you could see you can get photos of your animal, your sponsored elephant, on a billboard somewhere else. And that idea was so impressive, then they actually took it to Australia and Times Square, and it went to France and Italy. So all the media partners started to get onto it, and this virtual set of elephants wandered essentially through all the media in the world and came back and earned a huge amount of money for the charity, but also just showed you how those pieces of media can link up. So if you're thinking worldwide, there's a really good example to think how that can work as well. So it also was a triumph of technology. So all of these elephants are real-time rendered. So they're using WebGL. Back in the day, that was like a big thing. Real-time rendered on a website, on a billboard. So not pre-rendered. So you sponsored an elephant, you can get it on the billboard straight away. This one, another one from Zagreb. So it's still happening here. So this is actually all about targeting. How do you find the right customer? So in this case, it's for pedigree. They're really interested in dog owners. How do you find a dog owner in a crowd of people? They've probably got a dog, is probably what I'd suggest. So what they did is they then trained the camera to look for dogs. Can you identify a dog? Yes or no. If somebody has a dog, they're clearly a dog owner, in which case you can then show them a dog-related product. Not only that, it could also show them a small dog, big dog, somewhere in between. So the message can also be tailored to the size of dog that you might have as well. So if it needs a different type of chew or a different size of food, it can do that as well. So, and also, top marks for dogvertising as well as a word. The world is better because that word is in there. Tank-free is a great example of using the location as the inspiration. So a lot of adverts can just appear on any old screen, and people don't really bother to think about them. Some of the best ideas is when somebody has said, it's going to be on that screen over there, there is a tree next to the screen and a building over here, and I'm going to use those in the creative itself. This is a really good example. So the billboards in this piece of video are all the same size as is legally allowed a killer whale in captivity, which as you're looking at it, it's too small. And that's the entire point. That's the same size as those billboards. So the whale in this case is trapped in the billboard. You then use your phone, you text a number, you donate £5, and you release the whale. The whale literally says, thank you very much. Well, it doesn't say, it says on the screen. It'd be weird. But it says, thank you for your donation, and then it escapes the screen. Great, you've donated £5, you've saved a whale. But when you're walking around the shopping centre, all of the spare screens that weren't showing adverts would show the whales that had been released, just swimming freely around the shopping centre and stopping by and go, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Christine, thank you for your donation. So it was really interesting, but using the actual format of the screen as the genesis of the idea. And you can go onto Google Maps and look at where the screens are and go, that's the one I want. There's a building over there. There's a bridge in the... So you can maybe use that in your creative. It's super powerful. And finally, the 10s. If you have been onto TikTok or Instagram recently, you will have seen these adverts. So they're sort of fake 3D adverts. So if you stand in exactly the right place, you will get this 3D vision. If you stand to one side, it all looks a bit weird and a little bit stretched. But in the right place, you will see this. So this is... You see at the top of the billboard, there's a fuzzy bit. That's just the bit where they created a false bit so that the cat can look outside the billboard. So they're using all the tricks of this. So this is the Kyodai Nico from Japan, which basically means giant cat, and it really is just a giant cat. But if you've seen any of the award-winning videos, I've like probably 10 or 20 videos or awards in the last 2 years have all been this 3D false view. So if you're looking to grab attention, this is a great way of doing it. So false 3D. There you go. So, and this is just this is only promoting the billboard itself. So there's no brand involved here as well. So those were the 10. If you've got at least, hopefully you've got a sense of some of the things that are catching the eye of the judges in the out-of-home industry. So now I'm going to give you the extra bit, bang on time as well. So these are the mind-blowing future of digital out-of-home. So I'm going to do this in 3 easy chunks, and there's only a couple of examples in each. I'll do now, I'll do the next, and I'll do the future, which is a little bit weirder. So things you should know about now are all based on pretty much the hype that's going on right now. So the first slide I'll show you is about hype, and it's all about things that you're hearing about that don't necessarily need to be worried about. So this is the Gartner hype cycle, comes out every August. If you don't know about it, it's worth waiting for, and go and search it out. What it is in 5 areas. Something happens, and that's called the innovation trigger. Something happens, something is invented. Then you hear about it. You maybe hear it at a conference, or you hear it in the news, or wherever you hear it. That's where you kind of go, oh, it can do everything I've ever thought. NFTs is a really good example. The metaverse, blockchain. Imagine those. They went, oh, it can save the world. And then you realize it isn't quite as good as you thought it was. You go into this trough of disillusionment. And then eventually somebody goes, well, actually, you can use it for this, the slope of enlightenment. And then all of a sudden, the plateau of productivity, where you actually find something to use. At the moment, you might notice right at the top of the hype curve is generative AI. That is swallowing everything right now. It is super hyped. But just be aware, we are going to go down into the trough of disillusionment when we realize it isn't quite what we thought it was. It is going to happen, so just be prepared for that. It never carries on up. This is suspiciously empty right now. So there's a phrase in the UK called constipation. Basically means when you can't go to the toilet. That's what this is happening right now. Everything is constipated around generative AI. So just be aware, when that tips over, there's going to be a lot of things that follow through. That said, let's look at now. This is the first thing. So this is Firefly from Adobe. It's actually based on their Sensei large language model, generative model. So it sort of creates images. And now you can get this in Photoshop. You can get it in Illustrator. You can get this infused into After Effects. It is in their product right now. So you can now just use text to generate images. If you are in Illustrator, you can use it to generate versions. You can just say, I'd like a picture of a tree on the moon. It will create a vector version of that. And you can just keep generating them until it gives you, broadly speaking, what you would have done yourself. And then you can edit it. There are lots of other things you can do in Photoshop, After Effects, Illustrator, and so on. So if you're thinking generative AI is out there, it's already in commercial products that you can get from the Creative Suite from Adobe. So just be aware of that. False out-of-home advertising. Hands up who has seen any of these, probably on TikTok or Instagram. Lots of hands going up. Exactly right. So none of these are real, but everybody said, especially the first one, the Maybelline tube. It's not real. It's just CGI. So there were no eyelashes on a tube. There wasn't even a billboard in the background. Likewise, there is no giant Barbie in front of the Burj Khalifa. There isn't. Okay. So, but people don't care. They just go, that's a great concept, and it just goes straight onto social media. So the industry is quite curious about this right now. I was actually in Latvia last week doing a whole session just on false advertising. It's really interesting. Nobody quite knows what to do with it, whether it's good, whether it's bad. The Las Vegas Sphere, people have started to do things on the Las Vegas Sphere. That costs nearly $500,000 a day in advertising, and yet people are just putting it into Photoshop and getting free advertising from it. So that's the conundrum in the industry at the moment. Third party, we've got to talk about data. It's a bit boring, but I'll try and make it interesting. Third-party data is what's kind of drying up. GDPR, you've not got as much third-party data from your advertisers. So ideally, you should be trying to find your own first-party data. Maybe you have an app or you have a website. That's your data. That's your first-party data. But there are other data sets out of there which might be useful for your media planning, your creative idea, your strategy. Two examples here. If you drink gin, you are more likely to impulse purchase on the internet. And that's by a long shot, as opposed to a whiskey drinker or a beer drinker. And you're more likely to buy clothes whilst you're drinking gin. So if you could find those gin drinkers, how would you change your media plan, and what would you change? And on the other side of the screen, when Pornhub had a server outage, the searches for Fortnite went up by 60%. So you're thinking, that's interesting. I don't know what you do with that information, but there are data sets out there which might identify your customers and where you might be able to identify them. And if you're listening for outages on the Pornhub server and you've got a dynamic campaign, then maybe you've got more eyeballs available at that time because Pornhub is down. I'm not saying go onto Pornhub, but they do publish their data and it's quite interesting. So look for novel data. And QR codes. I do have to mention QR codes. I've been a big fan of them for like 15 years, and finally QR codes are having their time. But innovation in QR codes, again, nobody knows what will happen when you scan a QR code. It might be brilliant, and that's the gamble that you take. So this 1,500 drones in China making a ginormous QR code, who's not going to scan that? I would scan it. And likewise, you've got Rick Astley. Every single frame of that animation of Rick Astley will take you to the Rickroll video. So now you can do an animation of Rick Astley. And in the bottom corner, you've got a generative AI image that was created of maybe a market scene, but is also a scannable QR code. So you can imagine adverts in the future in your magazine or on a screen that would look like an image, but you can just scan them, and there'll be a QR code as well. So don't forget QR codes. Let's have a look at next. This is what you should just think a little bit further out. Synthetic data, big sort of thing at the moment. So if you've got a campaign, you've got all your data, you're trying to model your new campaign on your existing data, but there are some variables that you don't have. Synthetic data is what you need. This is an example of NVIDIA's Omniverse. So they created a 3D version of synthetic data. If you're trying to train your car, your self-driving car, you can train it on this data. It looks the same as a camera would find. What if it's foggy? What if there's a tree? What if there's an animal in the way? Great, you can train your cars on synthetic data, not real data. It doesn't have to be visual. If you want to know what happens to your product sales in the rain in a different country, you can pretty much simulate that data and still use it in your models now. So lots of companies doing that. You can also generate entire ads end-to-end using AI. So this is probably 2 months old now, 3 months old, and we're much better at doing this now. But you start with something like ChatGPT, you come up with a script, you take it over to Midjourney, you create the key images, you take it over to Runway ML version 2 to generate the videos of that. You then generate the music, if there's any audio. Now, it's not very good at mouths, and it's not very good at fingers. It's brilliant at fire. So you might notice when people are drinking, there's weird things going on. It will get better. So if you're talking about personalized advertising, idea goes to one person. You can pretty much generate it in real time. This I have to talk about. Has anybody seen the Flipper Zero? If anybody wants to have a look at one, it's this thing, 150 euros, and I can start being a sort of pretend hacker, a beginner hacker. With a little bit of knowledge, I can be quite a serious hacker with this device. So because this device is on the market, 150 euros, anybody can buy it, I can start hacking into Teslas, I can start hacking into screens, I can start making air conditioning go on and off. I can get into my hotel room without a key with this device. Now, if you work in hardware, your product is hardware, or you have any sort of communication with any device, I can get into that device with this. I can store your credit cards, I can store anything. So it's quite interesting that you've got a lot of amateur hackers out there that are trying to attack you for fun. So if you didn't think of that world, there's an entire load of people that are telling your charge port on your Tesla to go up and down just for a laugh. So just be aware of that and have a policy to that. Talked about programmatic, kind of. So this is the Performance Mac. Oh, here we go. So this is actually using bits of advertising to generate the campaign. With programmatic, you usually generate the ads, and they go to the different places based on the audience. This is actually saying, well, just give me the cat, and I'll create the script, I'll create the voiceover, I'll translate it into a different language, and I'll find the right audience, and then I'll show them that advert. So this is available right now on the Google platform. So when you talk about programmatic media online, it can actually be far more sophisticated than just finding the right audience for the advert you've currently got. And then we go into the future, gets a little bit weirder. The final one is especially weird. So this is a vision of using augmented reality headsets. So you've probably seen the Apple Vision Pro, you've probably seen the Quest 3 from Meta. Those have pass-through, so they have cameras that can look at reality and then project something else onto it, so augmented reality. And there are dedicated spectacles, glasses, that will do this for you. So this was back in the day. When I say back in the day, I mean last year, when there was basically a demo of saying you could buy an NFT, project it into the world, and this is what you would see. So in the future, out of home could be anything. You could subscribe to somebody else's version of reality and go and experience an Instagrammer, what they've put on the street where you live. So just be aware, augmented reality is coming. But the reality version of that, this is actually from CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, in January. This is BMW with a light change or paint changing car. So 32 shades of color. It's only the panels that you can see move or lighting up are the ones. So there's no logos or anything just yet, but that will happen. So you can change this. As soon as you take the electricity out of the paint, it stays that color forever. So if you wanted a red car outside your house but a black car at work, that's totally fine. Now, you can imagine in the future where you've got logos on this, you can become your own media owner and maybe use the cameras on your car to see if anybody actually looked at it. That's the future. But energy we're seeing to be quite an important thing, especially in America, where they have big outages. And if you're not critical infrastructure, so if you're not government or if you're not things like the waste or electricity, then you get shut down. So how can you generate your own electricity? This is a really interesting example. It's a tiny little bendable flag, and as it bends, it generates a little bit of electricity. It also has a solar panel on it. So if it's light, it'll generate electricity. If it's windy, it'll generate electricity. Now, it does flap, but you can imagine these in tiny little sensors up a tree, and it's just flapping away until it's got enough energy to then maybe do one thing like identify a rabbit or something like that, or tell you what the air quality is. So you can basically have these fit and forget, no maintenance, no moving parts, energy generation, to then start powering sort of the edge computing network. It's a long word there, but this is the final one. It sort of takes all that into account. So how do you know what people are, whether they actually saw your campaign? Well, you can reach into their brains and pull out the image. So this isn't made up, this is actually happening right now. So what you do is you show people some images. In this case, let's say an aeroplane. You show them an image, you put them in an MRI scanner, you scan their brain activity, and you look at the activity. And you show them lots of images, and you looked at all of that activity. And you show that to thousands of people, and you look at all the activity as well. And then what you can then do is you go, great, so for an aeroplane, we see this activity. You move that to one side, then you put somebody else in the scanner, and you just say, think of an aeroplane. And they think of an aeroplane, and you see the activity, and then the AI can then generate the image that they are probably thinking of. And therefore, what you're seeing on the right-hand side of this slide here, on the left-hand side is what they were shown, and on the right-hand side is what the AI pulled out of their minds. So did somebody see your campaign? Well, you can reach into their minds and just see what they saw. So kind of interesting. By the way, this is how you dream. So you can now actually visualize your dreams if you're interested. So that's kind of where we're possibly going. We're done. I think I'm bang on time, so that's good. If you want, I do a little podcast every Monday morning for free. It's on YouTube. If you want that, it's the QR code on the left-hand side. It's called the Dinosaur. Great, subscribe to that. It's for free, great. If you have been in any way inspired by any of the digital out-of-home stuff, I cannot stress this enough. Just go and have a chat. Dean's over there. Give us a wave. Go and have a chat to Go2 Digital, and they'll help you. Even if you don't really know how to join the dots, that's exactly why they're here. So other than that, thank you for listening in English. I do appreciate that. My Croatian would have been terrible. But thank you very much, and have a great rest of the conference.